He was Otto Scorsese, probably one of the most interesting people of the entire 20th century. In his long military career, he served the German Third Reich, where he would rescue Mussolini in an epic incursion into Italy. He would also be a dangerous spy and later become a famous businessman in Spain, even later serving Egypt, Argentina, and finally the Israeli Mossad. He maintained his ideology while carrying out several incredible missions, Rambo style. The Scarface. They nicknamed him. He was Hitler's favorite man of action, and rightly so. He was not a general who drank wine while his men fought. He was a frontline man who, like few in history, managed to move the entire world. In this video, we will see the story of this very interesting historical character of the 20th century, unveiling the story of the man dubbed by British and American intelligence as the most dangerous man in all of Europe. So get comfortable. My name is Kevin Aguilar, and this is Guns Club. Otto Scorsese was born into a middle-class Austrian family in Vienna on June 12, 1908, which, as was common in those times, had a long military history. Otto's family would end up suffering the reprisals of the defeat of the German Empire in World War I. However, despite the deep economic crisis, Scorsese would manage to survive thanks to the Red Cross. Even as a young adult, he would manage to go to the University of Vienna to study engineering. There he joined a Mensur fraternity, which was basically a fencing group, where the goal was to get those prominent scars. There, Scorsese would get his characteristic Mensur scar, which he would wear with pride all his life. With the fascist winds approaching Germany and Austria, our protagonist would end up joining the Austrian Socialist Party, where with pure charisma he would manage to gain a lot of influence. So much so that he took part in the annexation of Austria by Germany in March of 1938. When the Second World War broke out, Scorsese wanted to help the nation, so he decided to join the Luftwaffe to become a pilot. Unfortunately, he was 1.92 meters tall, too tall to fit into a fighter cockpit, so he was relegated to ground duties. To serve in the SS, he served in the 1st Leichtstandarte Division and was then sent to the 2nd SS Division Das Reich. In 40, where he would participate in the campaigns over Holland, Belgium, and the Ardennes, he would later fight in the Balkans and against the Soviets in 41. Scorsese would earn the Iron Cross for his excellent performance as a fighter in these battles. However, our protagonist would end up seriously ill and would be sent to Germany, where he would be promoted to colonel of the CSS, and as a command chief, he would be in charge of training elite troops, thanks to his extensive experience as a combatant. He stayed there for months until on September 13, 1943, a letter would arrive for him, with news that would change his life forever. Scorsese had been selected to carry out an extremely dangerous mission in Italy. The objective was to rescue Mussolini. Our protagonist was invited to the Wolf's Lair, where he would be received by the very top German leader himself. He would tell him that Mussolini had not reported in for weeks, and they believed he had been arrested. By that time, Sicily had been taken by the Allies. Therefore, the Grand Fascist Council, led by General Badoglio, orchestrated a coup d'etat to make an armistice with the Allies and prevent them from taking the mainland of Italy. Scorsese's mission was to venture into rebel territory and rescue Mussolini, which posed a problem. They didn't know exactly where this man was. The first step of the operation was to establish themselves in Italy to get more clues about Mussolini's whereabouts. So he would leave for Italy along with several Heinkel HE-111. However, as soon as they entered Italy, they would be intercepted by British fighters and would be shot down within Italy. Scorsese would suffer several injuries after the crash. Would Vanolio issue incorrect information about Mussolini's whereabouts? However, Scorsese located the man's precise position. He was at Gran Sasso, precisely at the Campo Imperatore Hotel on the highest peak of the Apennines. Mussolini's guards had orders to execute him at the first sign of an escape or rescue attempt. The topography was really complicated, but Scorsese, along with a group of elite paratroopers and gliders, would arrive at the hotel. Mussolini's custodians simply surrendered when they found themselves surrounded by an elite team. They took Mussolini and put him on a Scorch plane, which barely managed to take off due to the weight. In this way, they miraculously managed to rescue Mussolini in enemy territory. Hitler was extremely grateful to Scorsese. Mussolini would end up being the symbolic leader of an Italy puppeteered by Germany, and later, when it was invaded by the Allies, he would end up being shot by Italian hands. The war continued its course. Scorsese would receive the Knight's Cross for his great feat in Italy. Shortly after, on the 10th of September 43, he would be called again to the Wolf's Lair. Before this, he had participated in several other missions of a similar nature, like in Yugoslavia, where they tried to capture the leader of the Communist Party, Josip Broz Tito. Failing, but still impressing the higher ranks with the avant-garde methods they used in the Wolf's Lair. Again, the German leader would give him another mission to capture, alive or not, the regent of Hungary, Admiral Miklos Horthy, who wanted to surrender the nation to the Soviets. Scorsese had to take Burbang, the hill where Horthy resided. Once in Budapest, Scorsese's men discovered that Horthy's son would meet with Tito at a hotel. To negotiate the surrender, Scorsese would arrest Horthy's son, who would reveal that his father would announce the surrender on the radio that same afternoon. The entire nation. Our protagonist would besiege the hill, taking Horthy's son hostage. German armored vehicles eliminated all resistance on the hill, and Scorsese's team only suffered 4 casualties. The newly captured Horthy was taken to Germany, where he would end up being replaced by someone more favorable to German interests, and he was exiled to Portugal, where he would spend his last days in peace. The Scorsese from 1944 now had a lot of influence in the high command. He would be present in Berlin when Operation Valkyrie began, when the assassination attempt against the German leader was hatched. He was instrumental in stopping the rebellion, which lasted 36 hours and, in fact, many years after the conflict. He would speak very poorly of the general who hatched this rebellion in Germany, saying that he was the nation's greatest traitor. In the last major operation he led, the operation, Grave posed as an American company. Although it sounds like a movie with jeeps and even a captured Sherman, 80 German soldiers who spoke English perfectly made up this company. The goal was to penetrate the enemy lines attacking from the Ardennes forest. They could prepare for a brigade of 3,500 soldiers ending the offensive in the area. The operation was very successful. At first, they mixed with the Americans and managed to open large gaps in their defenses, using only the weapon of confusion. But quickly, the Americans found out about the plan and managed to capture a large part of these spy soldiers, shooting them for espionage. In the operation, Scorsese was seriously injured by shrapnel and was sent to Berlin to recover. From this point on, Scorsese would witness how Germany plummeted at the hands of the Allies after a small offensive against the Soviets. With 15,000 men who were mostly teenagers and elderly, he was sent on a mission of utmost importance. The objective was to blow up the recently captured by the Allies bridge over the Rhine River in order to definitively stop the Allied advance. However, the operation was a complete disaster, leaving Germany in total chaos from that point on. He would later find out that his hometown, Vienna, the city where his family lived, had been taken by the Allies. Upon going there to see the fate of his family, he learned the worst. His family had fallen to artillery fire. Disillusioned, he ended up surrendering to the Americans on May 18, 1945. After the fall of Germany, Scorsese spent 2 years in different prisoner of war centers in Nuremberg. The prosecution exaggerated all his crimes, where, in fact, they were really minimal, as his missions were mostly against insurgents within the same empire. He was accused of a couple of crimes of which he was innocent. And finally, he was accused of trying to kill Eisenhower without any basis, so he was simply released without further ado. Once free, he managed to escape from Germany to one of the few nations that could accept someone with his ideology, to Spain. In 1948, he would end up settling in Madrid. Being a German hero, he was received with great hospitality, giving him a lot of influence, which he used to work as an engineer in many government companies. Having so much power, he was an important promoter of Odessa, a program to help former CSS members to be sent to Latin countries like Paraguay or Argentina. He would then create an anti-communist paramilitary group in Spain to eradicate communist influence in the country. 2 years later, he would work in the Israeli Mossad. He infiltrated a group of German scientists working in Egypt creating missiles to attack the nation that hired him. This way, he could give them plenty of helpful info. Despite his ideology, he accepted in exchange for parliamentary immunity. He later worked in another nation he sympathized with, Argentina, but this time as a bodyguard for Eva Peron, and finally worked in Cairo as an advisor to the president. To be born. And so the years went by. By the 70s, he had already succeeded in business and held power in several emerging empires. However, he would end up losing the battle against lung cancer on July 7, 1975, due to his fondness for smoking. And this is the end of the story of the most dangerous man in all of Europe. If you like this story, you'll probably like the story of the gunner whom the very same German leader put a bounty on for his capture. I highly recommend watching it. Thank you so much for watching this video and see you in the next one. Goodbye.